I'll just give a brief introduction, after which Vivek will present his talk, and then we'll have kind of an informal discussion about his talk between the co-organizers and Vivek, and then afterwards we'll open up the floor for questions. And that being said, I'll introduce the speaker. So yeah, I'm very glad that Vivek Patel of Meaningful Ideas could join us today. It probably doesn't need an introduction for this audience, but he's a parenting educator, and today he'll speak about the non-coercive and collaborative mindset that is the basis for his parenting philosophy. Vivek can also be found on social media, and I'll provide links in the description of the video that we'll put on YouTube. And he also is available for workshops, and more information on that can be found on his website, which we'll also link to. And that being said, without further ado, I give the floor to Vivek. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very excited to talk to you all and share some of my ideas. I want to talk a little bit about how I came to this philosophy and why it's so important to me. I'll start. Really, it started when I was 3 years old. When I was 3 years old, when I was growing up, I was raised in a very traditional parenting family with punishments and spanking and rewards, consequences and privileges and all that kind of stuff. And I remember this moment when I was on my dad's knee on the landing to go to the basement, and I was being spanked. And I was being spanked for being something that 3-year-olds just do, just being 3. And I had this moment where it was almost like an out-of-body experience where I was suddenly watching the scene from above, from an objective standpoint. And I was noticing and I was watching, and I could feel the dehumanization in this moment. I could feel the way I was being treated wasn't how humans are supposed to treat each other. I don't know how I knew that at 3, but I knew it. And the words came to me in that moment: one day I'm going to be a dad, and I'm going to do it differently. And that phrase stuck with me all throughout my life, all through the hills and the valleys of my life, and all the trials that I went through, and including being, desperately bullied when I was in junior high school, and then acting out from the coercion I experienced and the pain that I experienced in my teens and 20s, and becoming a very aggressive young man and entering a life of crime and violence. And I remember being 13 years old and just noticing, looking at all the adults and looking around, like I'm kind of looking up even now as I say it, I'm looking around at all the adults around me and thinking they don't have any idea about me. They don't respect me. They're not valuing me. They're treating me like I'm not even human. And adults always seemed to me like they were a separate species. And I remember thinking, I don't want to grow up to be an adult that treats 13-year-olds this way. Please, please spare me from that. I didn't even know who I was asking or what, but I just wanted to be spared from that. And I remember balling up my fists and squinching at my face and going, I have to remember what it feels like to be 13. I'm 13. And to this day, I still remember that moment so clearly. And when I'm in front of a 13-year-old, or most kids actually, when I'm in front of young people, they immediately know that I know this. They immediately know that I see them. It's an amazing thing to me how that little bit of seeing them clearly without the layer of thinking I'm an adult, that knows more, has more worth, or more value, or more validity, how it affects them. And a number of the parents that I work with on a regular basis, even are here in this chat, even on Zoom when I interact with their kids. They can't wait to interact with me again, and they keep wanting to talk to me. It's an amazing thing. And then throughout all of my life, I had all sorts of experiences like I talked about, but then suddenly I got married and I was going to have a kid. And I thought, I want to do that thought came back to me. I want to be a dad. I'm going to be it. Now I'm going to be a dad, and I want to do things differently. And what does that mean? And this is where I started to explore what I call the non-coercive collaborative mindset. And the non-coercive part is what we don't do, and the collaborative part is what we do. I call it the don't do and the do. And I really like the don't do and the do, and I like to have names for things that are a little bit fun, and so that they're easy to remember. And the don't do is the coercion. Coercion implying force and power to bend someone else to your will, to have a set of expectations that I have decided somehow are what's right, and then my kid has to conform to those expectations, or anyone I'm interacting with has to conform to those expectations. And if they don't, I can use my power to force them to do so. And of course, in parenting, that power can be punishments and consequences and spanking, timeouts. It can be rewards and praise to manipulate, but it can also be just a sigh, or it can be just a look, or just a withdrawal, emotional or relational withdrawal. And all of those things, they create a condition where a kid has to try and figure out how to manage this coercive system. And when they're managing a coercive system, when they're managing this relational violence, it's very challenging for them to actually learn about themselves and learn about the world. And so I didn't want that for my kid. I mean, I went through that, and I didn't. It took me years before I even knew that there was a self to start learning about, or even had that idea. And so I thought, I don't want to parent just from the surface, just from behavior. My kid is not just a collection of behaviors. And when she was born and I looked into those eyes, I could see her deep humanity. And I thought, I want to parent from the deepest part of myself. I want to parent from the most profound part of myself. What's the deepest and most profound of me that I can offer? This is my thinking and my feeling and the way we interact. All of it, I wanted the deepest. And it never made sense to me then, therefore, it didn't make sense to me to treat her like I saw everyone around me was treating kids. My kid's 24, by the way. She's 24 and a half, planning to move out soon and spread her wings and fly, which I'm very kind of equal parts excited and grief to watch her go through that. And so parenting from deep humanity has always been my priority. And of course, if I'm parenting from the deepest part of myself, then I'm not going to hold power over her. I'm not going to use the coercion and the force. And so from the early days, I decided I'm never going to punish this person. I'm never going to use consequences on this person. We never even said no to her for anything. Now, when I say no, I mean no as in I'm the power and authority who knows what's best, and I'm saying no. There are times I can't, like I just can't buy that because the money just isn't physically there, or I can't go there because it's closed. Like there are times where you just can't. But that's unavoidable, right? But the hundreds and hundreds of avoidable moments that we say no, that we control, that we have power, I fought against those things with all of my might. And in the early days of my parenting, I had turned on my rebellious 16-year-old, and I used my rebellious 16-year-old self to rebel against the coercive mindset that was deeply implanted in me, still is, after 30 years of trying to untangle those knots. It's still part of me. And I'm certainly not perfect at it. I make mistakes all the time. I call myself a mistake-making machine because I make mistakes daily. But the beautiful thing about that is I'm able to recognize myself as that. So I'm able to be side by side with my kid as we're both making mistakes, learning about life together. So that's one thing, is that parenting from deep humanity, from the most profound that I can think, that I can feel, that I can reason. And then the second thing is I recognized early that, in my family, the three of us, and fortunately for me, my wife is just as radical as I am. Actually, I often say she's more radical because I kind of grew up radical in my rebellion, but her expression was a little bit more straight-laced, and for her to parent in this radical way was even a farther distance for her to even travel. And so when I was watching the three of us interact, when I was seeing this little being, the baby, before really having labels and distinctions and words, this consciousness that I was interacting with, I could see the fully conscious being there. And I realized that we're not discrete individuals. One of the things about behavior modification is seeing people as discrete individuals. And I never quite saw us as a discrete individual. And I call it the liquid system versus the pool ball system or the billiard ball system, depending on where you are. And so the pool ball system, when you're playing pool, one ball hits the other, and they're affecting each other only for that instant that they're actually in contact. And the rest of the time, they have their own existence, their own momentum, their own path. And yet in a liquid system, like in a pond, for example, if you make an impact on one part of the pond, it ripples through to the whole system. And my saying is every part of the system affects every other part of the system. And this is really powerful to me because when I realized that, I knew that we were always influencing each other in every moment, every thought, every word, every choice. We were always influencing each other. And there's a beautiful opportunity in that. And there's also a great danger in that if we do it unconsciously. And I wanted to do it consciously. I wanted to do it consciously in alignment with what I felt were like, the deepest principles that I could think of, my priorities, my values. And then I started to think, wait a minute, I don't even know what my priorities are. I don't even know what my principles are. I don't even know what my values are. I know what has been imposed on me from my own past. So then I realized I have to do this whole rediscovering of myself. What are my values? What do I care about? What is important to me? And how do I even figure that out? And so that was a huge area of exploration for me. And of course, at the same time that I was exploring that, I was helping my kid explore that for themselves. And so this is the other thing is I didn't want to impose my values. I didn't want to impose my priorities on her because as soon as I do that, then it's like I'm programming a computer rather than having a relationship with a human being. And that's not what I wanted. So then I realized, okay, I am going to let go of the models of the past and the coercive, hierarchical power structures. And so I didn't want to interact that way. We always endeavored to have horizontal power sharing rather than have any kind of power over. And so I wanted to replace it with something. I knew I had to replace it with something because I also didn't feel it made sense to step back and imagine I wasn't influencing, and my kid could just have their own life because I recognized the liquid system that we were all a part of, right? And so I wanted to replace it with a model that made sense to me, that still honored my child's individuality, their deep humanity, and also also created the most effective and profound and in alignment relationship that we could. And so I came up with what I call the 3x3x4 relationship. And all the names for this stuff, by the way, I've been developing over the years. I have a whole chart like on my wall where I've written all of this stuff, and eventually it's going to find its way into a book. Right now, it's all in my art. So a lot of it is in my articles. I've written over 500 articles, and I've made over 250 parenting videos, and I've taught tons of workshops. So there's a lot of information out there. I just haven't coalesced it into a book yet. So the 3x3x4 relationships are, the first three are model, guide, and friend. Model, the relationship of model, the relationship of guide, and the relationship of friend. And all three of these work together. And all of them are mutual. This is the other thing. So the model is recognizing that children learn much more from who we are and what we do and what they experience than any lecture that we give them. And certainly when we're using coercive methodologies, coercive systems to control them and modify their behavior, they're not learning the things that we think they're learning. You know, they're not learning respect. They're learning to be afraid or to avoid pain and punishment or to avoid the loss of the reward. You know, and so I was thinking, well, the influence is happening anyways. How do I relate to this influence with the most integrity, with the most alignment? So the first was model. So the first model, of course, is how I'm treating my kid. How I treat my kid informs them experientially, informs them about relationships, informs them about themselves, informs them about who I am, informs them about how power works. One of the things about being a parent is that we have systemic power over our kids. And I say systemic power is power you didn't choose and power you can't refuse. So it's in the system, it's built into the system. For example, I have monetary power over my child. Not so much anymore, but now she's 24 and has a job. but I had monetary power over her. I had physical power over her. I had access to resources power over her. I had legal power over her. Access to housing. You know, it's my house. As long as you're in my house, you do my rules, kind of thing. So I had that power over her. I had emotional power because kids like have this desire for connection and attachment and acceptance. And so with all of the and some intellectual power because I knew how to manipulate, you know. And so with all of these different powers that I had, in order to when I every time I interact with her, I'm informing her about how to operate with power. Do I want children to learn that when they have power, they can use that power in a violent way to make other people bend to their will? Or do I want them to hold that power with integrity and treat work towards creating real collaboration? The don't do and the do, right? The don't do is using that power in that way. And the do is working towards true collaboration where everybody's needs and feelings and preferences and their neurotypes and the way their bodies work and all of this stuff is taken into account and given real care and real value. And then looking at the situations that we're dealing with as a community, a family community or a broader community, and how can we work with this situation in a way where we all feel that we've been really tended to, really cared about. And it's such a profound thing. So every time I interact with my kid, I'm asking myself that question: what kind of model am I setting for this? The second model is how I treat myself. And this is why, excuse me, like for example, taking a drink of water. Taking a drink of water, it's actually tea. Taking a drink of tea while I'm talking to people because I want to take care of myself because I'm thirsty. I could have just barreled through that, but I didn't. So how I treat myself has a profound effect, again, on how our kids learn to treat themselves, about how they learn to care for themselves through mistakes, to care for themselves and to celebrate their successes, to even frame how they even frame mistakes. Now, I remember this time when I really could see my kids' relationship with mistakes, how it had taken hold from all the work. When she was like 18 or something, I was in the bedroom in the morning and she knocked on the door and came in. Dad, can I come in? I spilled some spaghetti sauce on the floor. Can you come help me clean it up? And when it came out, it was like a crime scene. The spaghetti sauce was all over the floor, splashed on the cupboards, all over the counter. It was everywhere. And there was not a hint of wrongness in this young person. I would have for sure been like, someone's going to be upset with me, right? I would have had that panic. Even at 52, I still get it. I still get. Just the other day, I made a decision that I really should have asked my wife about before I made it, and I just went ahead and made it. And then I felt so bad. I was like, and I was so scared. She's going to be angry at me. She doesn't do that, but I have that fear in me. And when I saw my kid, and we talked it out, and it was fine. And but when I saw my kid make this huge, what normally would be considered a mistake, and just be so cool about it, you know, it's not like she didn't take responsibility for it. She came in, she asked for help, we cleaned it up together. We actually pretended it was a crime scene, and we were imagining what it would be like to solve this crime and who was all involved while we were cleaning it up. But that's, you know, like a couple of decades of work to get to that. And this is the modeling. The third part of the model. So the first part is how we treat our kids. The second is how we treat ourselves. And the third is how we treat others. And so others means other adults, other kids, the person checking us out at the grocery store, and also how we engage with other systems. You know, how am I engaging with the media? How am I engaging with the financial system, with the legal system, with the education system? There are so many systems that our kids, that we all interact with. And the way I interact with those systems informs our kids how these things work. And they either They either learn to have fear-based relationships with them, or they learn to navigate them based on their own principles, priorities, and values. So the model relationship is really big. By the way, yesterday I was practicing this. I was practicing this. I did a run through of this, and it went on for like 3 hours. And I'm cutting it down a little bit. I always have a lot to say, and I have a lot of stories because I've been practicing this not only with my kid, but I also have been in the school system quite a bit. I've taught. I've been a teacher as a volunteer, but I've been a teacher in the school system. I was a stay-at-home parent. I volunteer at youth organizations. I've taught kids dance and martial art classes, and I've just been working with kids, hundreds of kids for decades. And these same principles over and over and over again have a tremendous effect. So that's model. Model is very important. The second relationship is guide. And again, I should say before I go on that the mutuality of that is I also took my kid as a model, right? When my kid would do something, the way they would interact with something, there was always something for me to learn from her. And this is the guide. This also goes into the guide relationship as well. The guide relationship is a mutual relationship as well. I learned so much from my kid. And not only do I learn from her, she feels that I learn from her. This is the thing, right? It's not enough for me to just say it. She feels it. And we've worked hard that she feels it. So when my kid was born, I was 28 years old, and I'm 52 now. She was 28. I was 28, and I knew at that moment I had made 28 years worth of mistakes and reflected on them. I was always trying to reflect on them. One of my practices is every night before I go to bed, I reflect on my day. What did I do that was in alignment? What did I do that was not so much in alignment? What can I learn from that? What can I work on tomorrow? How can I process? And 30 years, I've done this every single day, pretty much. And so I've had all of these years of reflected mistakes. I didn't want that to go to waste. I didn't want to not share that with my kid. I wanted her to get the benefit of that. And at the same time, I didn't want it to be an imposition. I didn't want it to be a lecture. I didn't want it to be, I always say we parents and adults in general, we make learning a drag. And when we make learning a drag, kids don't want to learn from us, don't want to learn with us. I don't like to say don't want to learn with us. They don't want to learn with us. And it even affects their relationship with learning itself. And I always wanted this experience of learning and growing and increasing our understanding of the world and recognizing the things that we don't without the shame that not knowing often plagues people with. I want it to be a joy. And so the guide relationship is so profound for me. I know that I've had people that are teachers that I've had teachers and people that have been guiding me, that have mentors, that the way they interacted with me made me feel small, made me feel less worthy, made me feel like I was stupid, made me feel like I was incapable. And it made me close up. I didn't want to learn from those people. But when I have a learning relationship with someone that I feel really sees me, really values me, really respects me, really honors my deep humanity, my heart opens to that experience. I want to be in that relationship with that person. And I know the beautiful the beautiful learning, the beautiful experience of being in a relationship with someone that you feel you can really learn from, and it's safe to do so, and it's empowering to do so. And so this is what I wanted with my kid, right? And I knew there was this is the question I would ask myself: is this moment, is this choice, am I enhancing the guide relationship, or am I damaging the guide relationship? Am I making learning something that's interesting and joyous and empowering and something to seek after, something to do more of? Or am I making the guide relationships something to shy away from that seems dangerous? And when I interact with people online, you can see a lot of people just aren't open to new ideas and new knowledge. And because it feels scary, because learning was made to feel scary. Mistakes were made to feel scary. And this is also what I call generational family evolution. That instead of repeating the same cycles over and over again, I mean, some evolution happens anyways because the world changes and the environment changes. But to engage in the idea of generational family evolution consciously, to to take what I've learned through my mistakes and empower my kid with that, so that when they are doing their work, they're learning things that it took me 50 years to even realize it was something to learn. And so then it sets our kids on a path that's way beyond where we started, certainly where I started. And this whole idea of making learning something beautiful and valuable. Just a couple of days ago, my daughter and I went to a park, and we were playing on the swing set together, my 24-year-old and I, because we still play. Play is such an integral part of our relationship. And play and learning, those two things are so profound. And we were swing on the swing set. And from the time she was very young, I taught her how to swing on a swing set. And I showed her, and this is one of the ways that we explored life, right? We learned about the physics of it, and we explored the physics of it. And we learned about the body and how to move the body and the most effective ways to move the body. Because I'm also a martial artist, I'm also a dancer. So I have some idea about how the body moves and works and relates to forces. And so even as a young child, we would look at how can we get the highest swing out of this, and so we haven't done that for a little while. So we were swinging just a couple of days ago, and we were done swinging. We were both like so exhilarated. And when we got off the swing, she was like, "Dad, you know what I noticed?" I was like, "What, kiddo?" She said, "We swing exactly the same. We have the same technique. You taught it to me so many years ago, and now we swing the same." And what I loved about that moment was she wasn't rolling her eyes, "Ugh, I'm the same as my parents." She was celebrating this. It was something beautiful for her, because the co-learning relationship that we have is something that's so valuable to her, because it's never felt like an imposition. It's never felt like I've told her she's wrong. It's never felt about wrongness. It's always been about us exploring together. So that's the guide relationship, the mutuality of it, and creating the relationship where it feels empowering and joyous and safe. And the third relationship is friend. It's model, guide, and friend. And so the model, guide, the friend aspect of it is the relationship of equals. Equal doesn't mean the same, obviously, but I'm not the same with anyone that I interact with. Everyone that I interact with has a different perspective, has a different way of relating to the world, has a different relationship to their emotions and different values. And so my kid is another person who is different. And at the same time, we always had that sense of equality, horizontal power sharing, of creating that deep relationship. One of my priorities that I set early on was, I call it relationship first. I say my parenting mantra is relationship first. And so relationship first, again, I asked this question: is this choice going to enhance the relationship or damage the relationship? What's going to happen here? What choice am I making? How am I furthering the safety, the connection, the emotional safety, the physical safety, the capacity to think together? All of these things are so powerful. And when I interact with young people, they feel that. I've mentioned that before. I remember just not too long ago, I was dropping my mom off at home. My mother is a brilliant human being. She's on this call now. And she's a brilliant human being. She, for the last 10 years, has been doing self-empowerment workshops in a men's prison. And her workshop is based on the same principle, the non-coercive collaborative mindset, no wrongness, co-learning, horizontal power sharing, all the stuff that you don't really see in the prison system, right? And her workshop, in the 10 years she's been doing it, has become the most requested, the most suggested workshop in the whole institution. This little grandmother comes in her wheelchair, and I call her Yoda because she comes in the wheelchair and she sits in front of the class and she kind of hobbles in. But as soon as she's teaching, she's like fire and power. and these when these guys come in, they're like, like this, or they're grabbing their crotch and they're like staring at her with, like who another person going to tell us that we're wrong and that we need to be fixed. And by the end of the first 2 hours, she does a 6-week session. By the end of the first 2 hours, they're sitting on the edge of their seat, their eyes wide. And by the end of the 6 weeks, most of these guys would give their lives for her because they have never experienced this kind of interaction before. Certainly they grew up similar to how I grew up. And I go in, I'm her assistant. I go in and I talk to them as well. And I share my life story with them, and all of them can relate to it. So anyways, I'm dropping her off one day after her workshop. And the reason I mention that, by the way, is because the same principles that work in a family work in the prison. It's not just like my kid. And I also work with thousands of families. Like my online audience is over 100,000. There's a lot of people out there that are working with these principles. So then I'm coming home and I'm dropping her off, and the neighbor, this is pre-COVID, and the neighbor comes out of his apartment with his 5-month-old, brand new 5-month-old, and we knew the neighbors, so we went over to him and we were like, "Oh my God, a kid!" And we were feeling really like all this like connection with this kid. And my mom, he said, "Do you want to hold her?" And so my mom took, and my mom's the grandmother, cooing, and oh, so sweet. And then gave the kid back to the dad, and the dad said, "Would you like to hold her?" And I said, "Yes, let me ask her first." and he kind of looked at me funny. I said, "Oh, really?" So I looked at this kid, this 5-month-old, and I kind of did this, and I said, "Would you like to be held?" And I looked right into her eyes, and she knew, and she kind of knows what this is, and she had just been passed to someone else, so she knew what the experience was. She knew what I was asking, and she didn't dive into my arms. She just tensed up that much, just withdrew a little bit. I took 2 steps back. And I said, thank you for telling me. I really want to honor your consent, and I appreciate you sharing your boundary with me. I said exactly that. As soon as I said that and took those couple of steps back, she just relaxed into her dad's arms. She was smiling and so comfortable. And he stopped for a second. He goes, "What just happened?" It wasn't my imagination. He saw the whole interaction. It was a fully conscious consent interaction that I had with this 5-month-old, not 5-year-old, 5-month-old. Fully conscious communication happened. And I said, did you see the conversation we just had? He said, "It was an actual conversation. I never even thought I could have a conversation with my kid." It's nonverbal, but you felt the full communication. It was amazing to him. He was like, he could hardly speak. And so, this is what I mean about being able to see past the surface of the behaviors, past the surface, and see the consciousness within. And so the friendship relationship, I call it friendship because it's that deep human relationship, and we often hear parents say, "I'm not your parent, I'm your friend. I'm not your friend, I'm your parent." And so for me, I often think that this person either hasn't really thought about friendship or has really lousy friends. But the friends that I have that are really deep, we think together, we learn together, we help each other see each other, we explore values, we explore our choices, and we have fun together, and we trust each other, and we're safe with each other, and we can give feedback to each other, and we learn from each other, and it goes on and on. It's a beautiful thing. And so I wanted that relationship with my kid. So I take model, guide, and friend, and I'm in every interaction, I'm watching all 3 of those, and again, it's that mutuality, right? So so the mutuality requires me to accept my kid as a guide a lot of the time. And one of the things that I do consistently is I go to her and I ask her for her suggestions on things. And if it's not going to destroy the whole system, I'll take her suggestion, whatever it is, and then I also go back and I reflect, oh, this is what I did, and this is when I took your suggestion, and this is how it worked out. And here's some of the parts that didn't work out, and how can we learn from this, and what can we do about it? And it becomes this, again, the co-learning experience. I call it a whole being co-learning relationship of equals. I have a lot of names for this, and it's whole being because it's not just the parts of me that are acceptable. It's the whole of me, the whole of my kid. And also all the parts of us. This is the 3 times 3 times 4. The 4 is mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, if you're into spirituality. I always say if you're into spirituality, because you don't have to be to follow any of this. But if you are, you can include that. Or thinking about consciousness, right? All right, let me move on. So, so the next is the 3 times 3. The next 3 is relationship. The 3 relationships: the relationship with self, the relationship with the parent, and the relationship with other. And I kind of talked about this earlier with the modeling. So there's 3 relationships that I'm aware of my impact on, my influence on, and that is number 1, the relationship, my kids' relationship with themselves. And it's the mental relationship, it's the emotional relationship, it's the relationship with their physical self and with their spirit, or their consciousness, depending on how you think about that. So there are different things about that. Number 1, one of my main focuses was no wrongness, and no wrongness means that everything that happens is an opportunity for us to learn together. It's so different than the wrongness, which is shame and blame, and you're less worthy, and you're a problem that needs to be fixed, and how can we fix you? But no wrongness is this moment. Let's look at what the impact of this moment was. Let's look at what we want the impact of our moments to be, and then how can we move closer to them? And doing that kind of exploration, it's something really beautiful. But part of what that does is it helps kids see themselves that way. So one of the things that I work with is what I call the self-reflective questions. I don't want to, is what my saying is, I didn't teach my kid what to think, I taught her how to think. And this is so important. Of course, it means I'm thinking about how to think. I'm always thinking about how to think about things. And so some of the self-reflective, hang on, need another drink of tea. Even when I announce that I need another drink of tea, instead of just taking the drink of tea, part of me is thinking, I better tell them I'm doing this because they might criticize me for it. I see all this happening in my head because they might criticize me for it. And so I better announce it, then they'll criticize me less. At least I can notice these things now. Next time I'm not going to mention it. Well, maybe I will, I don't know. but my intention is I'm not going to mention it. All right. So relationship with, so the next 3 relationships are relationship with self, relationship with parent, relationship with other, the self-reflective questions. That's where I'm at. So some of the self-reflective questions are, how do I think about this? And what do I think about this? How do I feel about this? How do I feel about it emotionally? How do I feel about it physically in my body? What's my body telling me? How do I feel about it in my intuition, in my consciousness, in the quiet of my mind, or the not so quiet of my mind, or my spirit, if you feel if you're into that? What is my intuition telling me? How do I feel about this? What are my values? And this is a big one, right? Like so often we impose our values onto our kid. Actually, that's the traditional mindset. It seems to make sense. You have to teach your kid values. You have to teach them right from wrong. And you can hear even the tone of my voice changes when I start talking about that, right? And suddenly there's this like big separation that happens, and we're not co-explorers anymore. And then kids have to keep one eye open around us. But no, I wanted my kid to ask that question for themselves. What are your values? I remember when she was very young, like 6 or something, she stole $20 from her uncle's place. We were at his place and she saw $20 in a bowl and it tempted her, and she stole it. And she came home, and then she came over to me. We were sitting on the couch right over there. We were sitting on the couch over there because we've been living in this house a long time. And she said to me, "Dad, I stole $20 from Uncle's house." Now, first of all, I have to tell you, I had so much joy in that moment because I was like, oh, it was only 6 years, not 25, not 24 years, 24 and a half years at that point. But I was like 6 years of work, and she feels safe and comfortable to come and tell me this. I was so happy. I didn't care that she stole at that moment. I was just so happy to see this result. But anyways, the first thing that I did was I said, "How do you feel about that, kiddo?" I didn't say, "How do you feel about that?" which has an implication of how they should feel about it. I asked, like, with absolute neutral idea of what she should feel, but not neutral from the sense of being emotionally, relationally detached. It was deeply connected, holding a really safe space, emotionally, relationally. But as far as the answer goes, it was open. So I was like, how do you feel about that, kiddo?" And she was like, I don't feel so good about it. And I said, yeah, I can understand that. Do you know why? She goes, no, I don't really know why. I said, okay, that's okay. Because again, kids often will say, I don't know. This is something that I learned a long time ago. Kids will say they don't know, even if they really do know. And I really believe they do know when they say they don't know. What they don't know is how to explain it to us. I can barely explain my emotional state to people in words that actually represent it, because I'll go on for a long time about my emotional state, and somebody will reflect back to me. I'm like, nah, that's not quite it, you know. And so I didn't like pressure her to have to know exactly why. And then I said, well, what do you want to do about it? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, there's some different options. And then we explored a whole bunch of different options. And I, again, without any value judgment attached to it, we explored options all the way from keeping the money and spending it on something we really like, to going back to him and apologizing and handing it to him. And we also came up with ideas that we could give him $20 on his next birthday, and that would be the same as returning it. And we could also sneak into his place and return it one day. And we came up with all these different ideas. And I said, now what you really need to do is just think about which is the one that feels most right to you. What do you want to do? And her decision was that we would go to Uncle's place. I would distract him, take him into the back of the computer. She would slip it back into the bowl, and so we did exactly that. It was a whole caper between the two of us. We had the whole plan, and the timing worked out. So this whole planning of the caper like created this deep bond of trust between us, you know. And then we did it, and the caper was successful, and we left, and we were walking home, and we were like, yeah, you know, we were so happy. And the celebration was not that we returned the money. It wasn't that. The celebration was that she explored her values, honored her values, discovered a value, and then we took action on it. And she felt so good about that, so good about herself. And part of the lesson was for her was, my value, you know, living with my living in alignment with my values feels really good. I never have told her living in alignment with your values feels really good. What we did was we experienced it together. I mean, sometimes I might have said it, but not in a way, not with a should. So what are my values is the next self-reflective question. All that was just talking about the question, what are my values? And so the next one are, what are my options, which I just talked about, right? What are my options? Another, like, how do I want to be treated? How do I want to treat others? You know, these questions. What is the impact of what I want? What is the impact of my choice? What are the impacts of my choices? And what do I want the impact of my choices to be? What kind of world do I want to contribute to? These questions, these are deep, deep questions that can come up in the smallest of moments and the biggest of moments. We can always be looking at things to explore. And so this idea of how do we think, how do we feel? One of the workshops that I gave at a alternative school once a couple of years ago was how to help your kids develop a relationship with their intuition, because intuition is a very complex thing. And a lot of the time I would say most of the time, we're not really taught or guided or even have our intuition nourished or inspired. It's something that's kind of hit and miss, and we're lucky if we can get a sense of it. And intuition is something that's really profound. You know, it's something that guides us. It's so whether we think spiritually, where our intuition is a connection to a universal consciousness, the sense of oneness with all of existence. You know, I'm this collection, I'm this arrangement of atoms that has somehow arisen out of this earth, and here I am. And I don't know why. The other day I was at a friend's place who has a dog, and I was saying, why does that arrangement of atoms think like that, and this arrangement of atoms think like this? and and so intuition is this powerful thing that we can explore. It's partially that we can think of it as that connection to to universal wisdom. We can also think of it as my unconscious being able to take in much more information and process much more information than my conscious can. It takes in my own values, my own perceptions, but it also takes in like subtle things that from many different inputs and puts it all together. And if I learn to be able to listen to that processing and what that processing outputs, then I have access to this incredible wealth of knowledge. And I tend to think of it both ways and use both, and and help my kids see that process occurring in themselves. And that's such a powerful thing to arm kids with when they go out into their lives. How do I think about this? And how do I feel about this? You know, even just those two things alone are arm kids in a way that very little can. And you know, when I talk about okay, let me go on. Wait, I don't want to go off on too many tangents. And although I love my tangents, let me just say I'm not complaining about my tangents. I love them, but I also have a sense of when not to. So they're talking about the three relationships: relationship with self, relationship with parent, relationship with others. So the first was all that was relationship with self. The next is relationship with parent. So I didn't want to be doing a 18, 20-year babysitting job, and then my kid doesn't want to see me again and goes off into the world and calls me once a week. I wanted that deep, profound relationship, relationship with deep trust and deep acceptance. I wanted my kid to know. I sigh because okay, let me say the one sentence. I wanted my kid to know that I accepted them as they are, with all of their mistakes, all of their flaws. And I put those words in quotes because I think of it as learning processes, but still all of their mistakes, all of their flaws, even when they hurt someone, even when they hurt me, I wanted them to know that I accept them as they are. I love them as they are. They're safe with me as they are. This is so powerful, and I wanted them to be able to lean on me in their most vulnerable moments, in their most chaotic moments, in their least together moments, to be able to lean on me, even if the rest of the world doesn't feel safe to lean on. I wanted to be the place where they could lean, and I knew that the world wasn't a safe place for them to lean on. I certainly knew that with my life and my lifestyle and my history. And so often parents, this is one of the things, right? So often parents will say, if you don't give your kids consequences, how are they going to learn about consequences, right? And my saying is, you can teach kids about consequences without giving them consequences. You can teach kids how to manage the coercive systems without replicating the coercive system in your home. Actually, if you replicate the coercive system in your home, you're not teaching them how to manage it. Unless you do it like as a role play, but that's different. But I wanted to be the one where we were together in this non-coercive, collaborative, deeply connected relationship. And then we would look at the coercive systems and what the impact was and why they are like they are, and how can we manage them and still keep our center intact. When my kid went to kindergarten, I told her what the system was she was entering into. I said, kiddo, in that system where you're going into kindergarten, people don't interact with each other like we do here. So you have to be prepared for that. And I should mention that my kid chose to go to public school. I shouldn't say obviously, we always honored all of her choices, even if there were choices that we thought would cause her more pain. If it was her choice, we still honored it. Because I never, even in kindergarten, I knew going to public school would not be the same as being home with her safe dad and finding other people who think like me and think like us, and then we could have that community, and like unschooling communities and all that. I wanted that. That's what I thought would be so great. But she, from that young age, she wanted to go to public school. So my wife and I were like, yeah, well, you are a human being making that choice. Of course, we're going to honor you and support you. And when she went, but when I didn't want her to go unprepared, so I would say, when you go into that school, adults think they have power over you. They think that it's their job to make you do things, even if you don't want to do them, or stop you from doing things, even if you want to do them. This is my simple way of explaining coercion. You make someone do something they don't want to do, or you stop someone from doing something that they do want to do. And this, just to mention it, because I always have to mention it, this doesn't include running out to the street and getting hit by a car. It doesn't include eating poison and dying, and it doesn't include touching a hot stove and getting burned. I call it the run into the street and get hit by a car, eat poison and die, touch a hot stove and get burned objection. Because it comes up in every post. I wrote a post about not punishing your kids last week, and I got that, and I saw a post come up in my memories from 8 years ago, and I had the same comments on it. And it's a pretty consistent thing. But still her choices, right? And I said, adults they use their power that's given to them by the system to do things called giving you consequences. And so they might do something called detention, or they might take away what they call privileges. And I had to explain, it's a little heartbreaking to explain these things. And I also explained how other parents treat their kids, because then you're going to end up with kids who are used to being treated that way. And wonderful, thank you, Luli. And and so and so and so she went in understanding how the system worked, and then she got to see it. And she would come home and she would like, Dad, you have no idea what the teacher said, and you have no idea what these kids were thinking about themselves. And she would like, we would talk about it, right? And so I always called it school self-defense. She would come home and we would do all this unwinding from being in that system, protecting her relationship with learning and herself, and exploring what was happening, and just managing that whole thing. And so the whole way along through school, we basically did it together. I always say we went through school together. We did high school together. We studied for the test because we did everything together, to the point that I would even do her homework for her. If she didn't want to do homework, I would just do it for her. It wasn't like, oh, you have to obey the system. You have to. I didn't care about any of that. I only cared about our relationship, and her relationship to herself, and her relationship to learning. But thinking that this system, that I fundamentally disagreed with the structure of it, that we had to obey it without question, didn't make sense to me. And I don't know a person in any job that wouldn't replicate that situation. Hey, I've got too much work right now. I can't complete it all, and I'm having some mental health issues right now, and I need some time. Can you help me with this? Of course, I can help you with this. Or you go to your boss. This is a bit much. If you're working in hopefully an environment with some progressive ideas, like my wife works at an architect firm, and they are trying their best to be progressive, and you can go to your each employee has a guide or a coach, and then they can go and they can discuss these things, and they can work things out with each other. It's not do everything or you're fired. And so our relationship going through school was like that the whole way along. And the other part of it is I call relationship first parenting drunk driver parenting. And drunk driver parenting is when my daughter was born, and I looked into those eyes, or we looked into each other's eyes and we saw each other. I had this thought, when my kid is 16 and they're at a party and everyone's drinking and doing drugs and having sex in the bedrooms, and maybe I didn't even know she was at this party. And notice I didn't say she wasn't allowed, because being allowed never existed in our home. I never imagined I had the authority to allow or not allow, or to let her do anything. We never used the word let. You let your daughter do this? No, I never let her do anything. But not because I didn't let her, it's because let didn't exist in our relationship. But anyway, she's at this party and I didn't know she was at the party. And the only way to get home was with a drunk driver. I wanted her to be safe and to call me. But not only to be safe to call me, but to feel the joy in the relationship that she could call me. Because some of her friends could call their parents, but they still, in many of their other circumstances, they would still get criticized or punished or whatever. And it was all. And my daughter would say some of her friends, even just to avoid the disappointed look, wouldn't call their parents, right? But I wanted my kid to feel like this confidence and this joy. I can just call my dad and he's going to love it, and he's going to love, number one, that I'm at the party. He's even going to love that I didn't tell him about it, because one of my sayings is I didn't teach my kid not to lie. I taught her how to lie. And because lying is an important life skill. And I didn't want to pretend that we never lie. Oh, honesty is a value. Yeah, honesty in certain circumstances is really valuable. It has an impact on relationships. It has an impact on our working relationships. It has an impact on how I feel about myself, sure. But there's lots of times where not telling the truth or telling a version of the truth makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, drunk driver parenting was really important to me. And of course, that extends into all analogous situations. All right, so that's relationship with self, relationship with parent, and then relationship with other. Other, again, is other people, other adults, her peers, and then the systems that she's going to engage in. She's going to engage in the education system, the legal system, government systems, financial system. There's so many areas of life that our kids that we don't have any control or influence over. So how can I empower my kid with the knowledge, the skills, the attitude, the understanding, the perception, the lenses that she can go out and that our kids can go out into the world and be really well equipped. My kid who's never had any of this kind of learning through consequences and stuff often goes into the world and says and goes and interacts with her friends and stuff and comes back and says, I don't understand why, but I seem to know a lot more about the way the world works than my friends, even though all of my my friends and the people that I know are saying that I'm not preparing my kid for the world. But she understands about how the financial system works and about how the legal system works and why it works and what, because we just always explored that stuff together because we're always engaging in that stuff. So we engaged in it in a way that we explored it together. And it's even something as simple as how to open a bank account and how to open a bank account and how to manage your money and what does that mean. Something as simple as that is can be so powerful. How to make difficult phone calls, how to communicate with somebody who's not listening to you. Communication is such a powerful art to help kids with. And one other thing is about how to evaluate the systems, not just to manage them, but to evaluate them. How are they in alignment with my values and my principles, priorities, and values? How are they in alignment with my preferences and how I like the self-reflective questions? How I want to be treated and the kind of systems I want to engage in, and what kind of influence can I have in this system, and what are the different ways I can influence the system, and how can I not influence the system, or how am I unable to influence the system, and how are they in alignment? How are they in alignment with my goals and my desired outcomes, and what are the coercive aspects of it? What are the collaborative aspects of it? What are the parts that are dehumanizing and more, respecting our humanity? And to be able to evaluate them and then make intelligent, well-considered choices around them. And when I say intelligent, well-considered choices, I don't necessarily mean always the safe one. Sometimes the well-considered choice is like something wild, and I always encourage wildness too, because that can be part of life if it is. So we have these are my notes for today. We have relationship with we have the model guide friend relationship, and then with that we have the relationship with self, relationship with parent, relationship with other, and then in each of those subcategories we have the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, relational, environmental. So I take all of those things and I'm watching all those things all the time when I'm interacting with my kid. I'm rarely ever just relaxed hanging out. I mean, even when I'm relaxed hanging out, there's a part of my brain that's watching all of these things go on and watching my impact on that, and I don't even hide that from my kid. Like she's always known that I do that, because it's one of the things she loves, that I actually do take the care to do that, because she goes to her friend. I remember the first few times she would go visit a friend's place and she'd go like, do you know how parents treat their kids? And I'd say, yeah, I do, kiddo. Tell me about it. What did you experience? And then her friends would come over to our place. Almost every single time a friend would come over to our place, they would stand in the foyer at first before they could even take their shoes off, a little bit in shock, because they hadn't seen a family interact. When any of us comes home, it's like this celebration happens right off the bat. Everyone's like comes to the door, and the greeting and the affection and the inquiring about things, and also tuning in. Sometimes we come in and we need some space, so then everybody backs off. Like we're also in tune, alive in the moment, and we've learned these dynamics over years. But the fact is, usually there's a parent with authority saying something to a kid, and so then they would slowly make their way in, and they'd sit on the couch, and they'd look around, and slowly they would warm up, and suddenly they're laughing, and my wife and I are like pouring on like all this validation and asking them questions about what they're interested in. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. All right, so that is the model, the structure. There are a whole lot of things inside of that structure that I talk about. I have this. I'm going to show you something. I have this. Can I turn my camera on? Yes. So here on the wall, I'm going to zoom in. Can I zoom in? Yeah. Here on the wall, this is what I call my chart. This is my chart. And this is where I have, I can't zoom in more than that. Oh, yeah, I can. Woo! All right. So this is my chart. And here on this chart, I have written, this is like pre-book, I suppose. You can see here is, where's my finger here? Yes, exactly. There. That's model guide friend, relationship with self, relationship with parent, relationship with environment, and TCS is up there because it's the only non-directly Vivek thing I've written on that chart. After meeting you, actually, Lily, in 2018, and it stuck with me all those years. And so I have like all sorts of things on the left side over here is strategies for parents. On the right side is strategies for kids. At the top is mindset stuff, and on the bottom is the philosophy. So I have all of these different things on that chart, and it's like extremely comprehensive, and I love it. And so yeah, where's my sheet here? So I want to talk about. I'm just going to talk about a couple more things. When I was very young, so talking about stealing, right? When I was very young, also around 7 years old or so, I was in the pharmacy with my family, and my sister, who's 2.5 years younger, she came up to me. She said, "Vivek, would you steal some makeup for me?" And she showed me this like makeup thing that she wanted, and I said, "Sure." And I slipped it in my pocket. It was a real rush, and I came home and I gave it to her, and she was so happy. And like 10 minutes later, she told on me. And I was so upset. I still complain to her about it to this day. We're actually we're actually really close friends now, and we're real profound supports to each other, and we can laugh about it now. And but she told on me right away, and I was upset. And then my parents come into the room with all this wrongness, right? Concern. Why did you do it, Vivek? Why? I don't know. And again, I did know. I could feel it inside. I could feel the seeking power. I could feel the seeking acceptance from my sister in a way, because we were fighting all the time. I was, there was a whole like the idea of getting away with something, of engaging with danger. Like there were so many things that were going on, really valid things that were going on that nobody really ever took the time to figure out and work with me on. But what they did do was tell me it was wrong, that you shouldn't steal because it hurts other people. And how would you feel? And then my dad marched me back to the store, made me apologize, made me give it back, made me offer to pay, thinking that he was teaching me responsibility and accountability. Of course, that's what you do. I mean, what else are you going to do, right? And so, the only thing that did, honestly, was made me get much better at it. And I stole for years and years and years. Started with little things, shoplifting, but I ended up in I mentioned this earlier, I ended up in my teens and early 20s running around with a particular crowd. I was going to say a bad crowd, but I don't really like to say that now, especially after 10 years of working in a prison. My mom said one of her quotes is, "I've been working in a prison for 10 years. I've met people who've committed every form of crime, and then also all of the prison guards and all of the staff. And in all those years, I've never met a bad person." I get choked up when I think of that, And so I don't want to say I was running around with a bad crowd, but I was certainly running around with a dangerous crowd. And the stealing, we had this whole ring of stuff that we were doing, this whole thing. I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail. But the fact is, I got really good at it. I only got caught one other time and almost caught one other time. And the rest of the time, I got really good at it. So teaching me accountability through the coercive, shame-based system, that it didn't work. Nobody helped me discover my own value around it in that moment. Oh, how my life would be different. Sorry, Mom. I'm not blaming you. I know you're listening to this. I'm not blaming you. You did the best that you could in that moment. And I know that my dad kind of forced the whole thing. But still, if somebody had been able to sit with me and help me discover my own values, what a different life I would have. So then fast forward, I'm in my early 20s now. And I'm in this store we had in Toronto called Sam the Record Man. And I was buying these jazz CDs. I was really into jazz. And I was walking out and I went to pay. And then I kind of got distracted in my own thoughts. And I walked out of the store with these CDs. No buzzer went off. And I was 2 blocks away when I looked down and I saw them in my hand. And I'm like stealing all the time, right? It's just part of my life. It's just part of who I was in those days. And then I saw them and I thought, that's not what I want. Like I could feel it inside. There was nobody telling me wrongness. It was what I call an epiphany of conscience. You know, I could see my own value all of a sudden, my own values all of a sudden around this. And I didn't want that. That's not who I wanted to be. And I could kind of see all the layers that had led me to it in that moment. And I walked back to the store and I told them what happened and I paid for it. And I was so happy at that moment. I felt so free in that moment. And I won't say I never stole again, but the urge to steal kind of left me at that point, you know, and it worked its way out over some time. But like that was the first moment that I thought that I had an awareness that I could actually choose my own values. What? You can choose your own value? I'm in my early 20s, the first time I even thought that, you know? And yeah. So, all right. So the last thing I want to talk about is just a couple of things about how I actually think about things with when I'm actually doing the parenting. And I'm just going to talk about a couple, and then we're gonna shift gears. One of them is something I call iceberg consciousness. Iceberg. I didn't create the analogy of the iceberg, of course. It's been used around it's been used for years. But iceberg consciousness is where I know that just the part of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water is a very small amount. And then the iceberg has a huge amount underneath. And someone once sent me the Amazon link to iceberg-shaped ice cube trays so that I could make my own little icebergs. And so what iceberg consciousness is, I see the behavior that's happening in front of me. And I notice my reaction to the behavior, and probably notice my desire to control it. But then I want to look underneath the behavior, because the behavior is the output. The behavior is the effect. And hammering away at the effect isn't really going to get us anywhere. I want to look at the cause. I want to look at the emotional, relational, mental, physical, sensory causes, environmental causes that are happening, and how can we work with those things? I also want to look at my own iceberg. What are my judgments about this? Why am I evaluating this as a good or bad behavior? And where does that come from? You know, and then like that iceberg consciousness is always with me. I'm always looking at it. I'm trying to look under the surface. As soon as I notice behavior causes a reaction in me, then I go underneath and I look underneath and I'm thinking about that. So iceberg consciousness is really powerful, and it takes some practice. It takes some practice because we have been conditioned through our own lives and through messages all over society that that behavior is the thing to pay attention to. You know, the only thing to pay attention to. Of course, it's a great indicator for us, but it's the only thing to pay attention to. And when we approach things from this behavioristic mindset, we lose so much of our potential in relationship and influence with our kids. Another thing is what I call the watermelon analogy. And there are these videos on YouTube where these people take watermelons and they put an elastic band around it, and then another and another. And of course, 10 or 20 elastic bands won't affect a watermelon, but they keep going until there's 200, 300, 400 elastic bands around this watermelon. And then one more elastic band goes on and the whole thing explodes. And there's watermelon flying everywhere and someone gets a seed in their eye. And it's really dramatic. And I love those videos. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what's happening inside of us, right? Inside of us, we have elastic bands happening all the time going around our watermelon. My head is kind of shaped like a watermelon, so it's like very apt. And so I'm always looking for those. When a kid has an explosion, I immediately recognize it as that last elastic band around with many, many other elastic bands. If you only see the one elastic band, it seems unreasonable. You know, but it's not unreasonable. It's extremely rational. It's extremely logical. It makes a lot of sense, even if we can't see all the elastic bands. So there's two things: the elastic bands, looking at the elastic bands in that moment, but also watching for the elastic bands as they occur and helping ease those elastic bands before the explosion happens. Sometimes it's taking them off. Sometimes it's cutting them with a knife. Sometimes it's helping the kid learn to take off their own elastic bands. And so being really in tune with the elastic bands is, like all the things that affect our emotional impact. You're something as small as, you're building a tower of blocks, and it falls over before you're done. And then the impact of that 2 days later comes out. It's adding on to a bunch of other elastic bands. Or you get a grade, you were really hoping for a particular grade and you didn't get that grade. Or even something as, honestly, sometimes for me, it's I'm trying to open the jar of pickles and I can't get it open and I get frustrated, And so the part of my frustration comes from the previous elastic bands, but that moment is also another elastic band. So you can see it's quite a complex system, and it's an ongoing thing. And when we can be in tune with that complex system and really be flowing along with it, we become much more effective. That's why I say guide your kids like the banks of a river guiding the flow, not like a dam stopping the flow. And this is what the watermelon is about. And then also it's the practice of taking care of myself, of my relationship with myself, which is so important. Because if I'm not in that continuous process of realigning myself with my consciously chosen principles, priorities, and values, then I'm stuck. So part of that is these 3 micro practices that I teach that I want to share with you, and I'm going to end with that. And then other stuff will come up as we talk. So the 3 micro practices are the micro meditation, the micro self-observation, and the micro self-compassion. And whenever I count to 3 with kids, I always do it like that. I always go 1, 2, 3, and they all laugh. And so the micro meditation is a 1 breath meditation. And the parents who work with these things on a regular basis have such transformative experiences in their lives. So the micro meditation is a 1 breath meditation. And I have a video on my YouTube channel, a short one, that explains the micro meditation. And I would recommend going and looking and watching it. My YouTube channel is Meaningful Ideas. And I have over 75 videos there, and I have another 25 in the can. And I have something like 70 hour-long videos of this nature in my membership group, which you can find me at, which I host with my colleague, Sujai Johnston. And you can find us at gentleparentsunite.com. So the micro meditation is a 1 breath meditation. So whatever you're doing, you stop for a moment and you just kind of notice yourself. You notice your connection to the earth, what parts of you are in contact. If you're washing dishes, I often do it when I'm washing dishes and I just feel the water running over my hands. And I just close my eyes. And why don't we all do this together? You can open or close your eyes. And you obviously don't have to, but if you would like to, you can join me in this. And we just take a breath. So we just breathe in, hold it for a moment, and then breathe out and hold it for a moment. And then we go about our day. It's not something that you do sitting in lotus position with incense and candles for a half hour every morning, every night. I mean, that's also great. And I try and meditate every day. But the micro meditations is just that 1 moment, and they can be hidden in little moments. They can be hidden when you're picking up a toy. I'm reaching down to pick up the toy, and just before I actually lift it off the ground, I'm going to go. And it takes an extra 2 seconds to pick up that toy. And so this is a really beautiful way for us to find moments of peace, moments of centering ourselves, moments of connecting with our mind. The second is, and you can try doing it once a day, twice a day, try doing it like that, just bring it into your life. The second is micro self-observation. And micro self-observation is where I call it popping out. I pop out of my head and I watch the situation from above, kind of like I did when I was 3, like I mentioned at the beginning. And if you didn't see it at the beginning, this is being recorded and will be put up on the Oxford Karl Popper Society's YouTube channel, and you'll be able to watch it from the beginning. So then I watch the situation from kind of outside. I kind of float. I kind of imagine I'm floating up above, and I'm watching the situation. And so I do this a lot generally, especially when I'm in situations which are a little bit more challenging. But micro self-observation is where I do it just for a moment. And so like if I'm opening a door, I won't just open the door. I'll stop for a sec and I'll watch myself open the door. And like for example, right now I'm talking And now I'm watching myself talking and I'm watching it. I can see my body. All of a sudden I can see the expression on my face I wasn't even noticing before. I noticed my hand doing this. Oh, look, my hand's doing this. Like I'm noticing things I wasn't noticing before. I'm noticing my surroundings a little bit more. That's a nice plant. I love the micro self-observation, right? But now I'm not doing it. But then I stopped doing it. Once I started explaining, I stopped doing it. I'm not like putting like heavy effort into trying to do it all the time, because it wears you out and then you're not going to do it tomorrow because it wore you out today. So the purpose of the micro is to make them, I call it gentle consistency, to make them sustainable. And the third is the micro self-compassion. And oh, how we need more self-compassion. We really do, you know, in our lives. We need more compassion. And so the micro self-compassion is where we just take that, again, we take one moment and we say, you're doing okay, Vivek. You're doing your best. I love you just as you are. And then I go on about my day. I go on with what's happening. And I like to actually have a few phrases that I can really feel inside. You know, I often think if my child comes to me really upset and I'm holding them and they want compassion, what would I say? You know, or sometimes I actually hold little Vivek in my arms, and I'll do this. You can see I'm doing this, right? I hold little Vivek in my arms, and I look into his eyes, and I go, "You're okay, kiddo. You're okay." And so I give myself that moment of self-compassion. Now, in my membership group, I also do a weekly meditation, and we have a self-compassion meditation, which goes on for an hour. We have self-observation meditation that goes on for an hour. And I have designed 15 different meditations specifically for working with our thoughts and our feelings and our body and our relationship to our kids. And we cycle through them every Friday. But the micro practices are brilliant because they give us that short burst, and they build layers and they build capacity over time. And then what happens is, and I hear this story from parents all the time, their kid does something that really upsets them and they're about to yell, and they have that moment of self-observation. They notice themselves. They notice they're about to yell, and they do a micro meditation. They go, and then they do the micro compassion. It's okay. Of course you would yell. You're upset right now. You feel attacked. Your kid's not attacking you, but you feel attacked. It's okay. You're okay. You're not a bad parent because you had that reaction. And then they immediately, and this all takes a second, right? And then you go in and with your kid and you're connected and you can be empathetic with them. You can say, I see that you're having a real hard time right now and I'm here to help you with it. Not, don't talk to me that way. You can express your feelings, but you can't express them like that. That's like a common thing. You can express your feelings. It's okay for you to have your feelings, but you can't express them like that. And what's happening, right? The kid is naturally expressing something naturally, organically, and we're telling them your natural organic is wrong. They're not getting that specific behavior is wrong. They're getting my natural organic is wrong. It's such a deep wrongness that gets stuck into our cells or in our nervous system and takes years to untangle. I'm still untangling it. And so this is what, and so then we're doing these micro practices, and it allows us this deeper capacity to be connected with our kids, to be able to notice ourselves, to be able to notice them, to be able to notice the system and the impact we're having on the system, to be able to ask, am I nurturing the guide relationship right now? Am I nurturing the model relationship right now? Am I nurturing the friend relationship right now? How is this impacting their relationship with themselves, their relationship with me, their relationship with the environment, with the systems, and their understanding of it? And then, and coming from it from that lens, coming from that understanding, it changes everything. And this is why I practice this, and I call it a practice because I'm still practicing, 25, 30 years in. I say 30 because I started thinking about it long before I actually had a kid come along, and also why I've written so many articles, because the details of it and how to implement it is hard because we have all of our stuff, however clear we are on the philosophy, we still have all of our stuff, our nervous system, our patterns in our brains and our minds. It's part of who we are. It's part of the way we see the world, and untangling those things and writing patterns that are conscious, it takes time. And then creating patterns in your family takes time. And so I really want to encourage you, whether you're a parent or not, to really have patience with your process, to really have patience and give yourself that compassion, and recognize that you're making mistakes all the time, and that's okay. But also to keep working towards moving towards that that ideal, moving towards your values. You know, I say I'm always stumbling, but I'm stumbling with purpose. And I love that idea that I'm stumbling with purpose, because it shows that I have a philosophy I'm working towards, but I'm also you know, fallible and always going to make mistakes. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's not just okay, it's beautiful. And this is what I want to feel, and I want you to feel it. And I certainly want the parents and the families that I work with and their kids to feel it. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I went on for quite a long time, but I actually cut this whole thing in half. and I think one day soon I'm going to do the full 3 hours in a public workshop. But I really appreciate you listening and being open to hearing all of this. And you know, if any of the parents, I know some of the parents I work with are actually online right now, and if you have any reflections or thoughts to share, that would be great too. And I also would love to hear what anyone else thinks. But now I think that we're moving on to the next phase of this, and I'm going to pass the microphone over to Sam and Liberty.
Yeah, thanks so much for the talk. First of all, I would like to show my appreciation with a virtual applause, and I'd like to join anyone. If anyone would like to join, yes, thanks. And yeah, I would like to say I think I agree with basically everything in your talk, but I have some skeptical questions, which I thought we could go through together.
Yes, which I love.
Cool. So the first thing that occurred to me was you had your story about your daughter and how she stole 20 pounds, and or was it dollars? I think it was dollars. Yes, Canadian dollars, right? And you took the approach of not being judgmental in that interaction with her, and it occurred to me, like, what would have happened if instead of saying I don't feel so good about it, she would have said, actually, that was great, I would like to do it more. And later on in the talk, in fact, it's kind of in some sense your own case was an example of what that would have been like, because you said there were things which were genuinely interesting about stealing the makeup for your sister. And I feel like parents in that situation would have this feeling of, okay, well, I want to engage with my child, I'm really trying, but what if what if they say that stealing was really fun, and I would like to, in fact, do it more or be better at it or something like that? Well, how would you engage with, or what would you have said to yourself if you had that opportunity to your younger self?
Yes, excellent question. Thank you for asking. I have examples of both in my interactions with young people. And I think it's really valuable to understand both. I actually just wrote a post about it recently called Negative Attention. And it reminds me of this time when this is before I had a kid, before I even had met my wife. So I was young. I was still kind of in my more aggressive phase of life. And I was in a park with a friend swinging on a swing, because I've always enjoyed being on a swing set. And this kid came up and asked if he could use one of the swings. So my friend got up, and he turned to me and said, "Do you want to have a swing race?" And I said, "Sure." So the two of us were swinging, and it's the middle of the school day, right? And he was like middle school age. So we're swinging, and I was swinging really high, and he was laughing, and he said, "Wow, for an adult, you're really good at swinging." And I said, "Thank you very much." And I said, "So what's going on? Why are you here in the middle of the day?" He said, "Oh, I got expelled." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, I took a knife to school and I threatened a teacher with it." And my friend immediately went, "That's horrible." And I looked at them right in the eye. I said, "You go away," because right away I knew that we were going to lose this kid if they reacted that way. I said, "You go away." And I was serious enough; they just walked away. And I turned to the kid and I said, "That's really cool. You did that? Wow, that must have taken a lot of courage to do." He said, "Yeah." And everybody was scared of me. I said, "Wow, it must have felt so powerful." And we talked back and forth this way for a little while. And at some point I said to him, "Hey, why did you do that? What was that about?" And then he started to tell me about all this abuse that was happening at home, and his dad, and the way he was abusing him and beating him and all this stuff. And it was the only way he felt he could get some of his power back. And we spent like a half hour together, going deep into this really deep emotional relational place, which we never could have gone to never could have got to if I had started off telling him that I thought what he did was wrong. And the impact of that actual interaction connected with so many of the needs that he was expressing by doing that action. Again, it's the iceberg, right? If I had attacked the behavior and didn't go into the iceberg, didn't go underneath, I would never have been able to actually help him see his own reason for doing it. I don't know if he even made that connection before that conversation. A middle school kid, right? This is not like an adult in therapy. This is a middle school kid who had this amazing awareness of self-awareness, self-reflection, because of the space, the relationship, and the no wrongness. Same thing again. This is just a few years ago. Just down the street, there's a gas station that keeps their some cases of pop outside, and this group of young teens on bicycles, they each grabbed a case of pop and then they took off, and I was like, I can't let this opportunity go. So I found one was going, and I knew that I went down a path, and I knew where the path came out. So I got him, I hopped in my car, and I chased him around, and I caught up with him, and he saw me chasing him. He was trying to get away, but then like the panic, and he kind of fell off his bike, and the pop kind of fell everywhere, and he was a little bit afraid. And I pulled over the car, and I jumped out of the car, and I went right up to him, and he was afraid I was going to whatever. And I meant to him, I said, hey, listen, kid, next time you're going to steal something, don't ride away in such a hurry. Because if you do that, you're getting so much, everybody knows you stole something. And then if you just like bike away a little bit more calmly, people around aren't going to, I mean, look at me. I knew right away you stole something and I chased after you. And next time it might not be somebody like me. I said, just like bicycle away, more cool, just be cool, like nothing's going on. And he's just staring at me like I never had an adult say this to him. And the same thing, I said, so what's going on with you? And he started talking about his life. And I said to him, listen, all throughout your life, you're gonna do things like this. We all make mistakes. But no matter what anybody tells you, you are not a bad person. In your heart, you're a good person, and you're loving, and you're kind, and you're caring. And he didn't like close off. No, I'm not. Like, he was like open and soft and receptive. And I don't think anyone had ever told him that before. I don't think he'd ever received that message, or if people had told him, it hadn't gone in before. And all of his defenses dropped, and I got straight into him with this message, you know. And this is just two short instances where going past the behavior makes such a difference. So then the other side of it is, if my kid, not the other side, another side of it is, see how even in speaking like this, I watch myself for either or thinking. I watch myself for like how I'm limiting myself in my language, and I'm changing it. So another aspect of this is that that if my kid did say that, and I wanted to help her evaluate her values around it, I don't imagine it's all going to happen in that one conversation. Exploring our values takes some time. And if she doesn't feel I'm a safe place with her to explore that value, then I'm going to lose the ability to be that co-explorer with her. And because, I mean, there's so many reasons she might say that. Maybe she's saying that because she does feel a little wrongness from me at that moment and she's pushing back. Maybe she's saying it because she did get a thrill, and maybe she can learn to find that same thrill in other ways that are less dangerous for her. Maybe there are some circumstances where stealing is okay, and we can even examine that. And there's so many different aspects to this that we can examine together, and we can learn discernment, and we can learn about ourselves that I simply can't do with my kid if I'm not there with them. When she was like 10 or 12 or something, she came home from school one day and said, I want to do graffiti. And I was like, oh, okay, kiddo, that's fascinating. Do you mean like actual graffiti, like on a wall, or you just want to like paint or something on the canvas? And so immediately, like the first thing I did was I gave her options without telling her I was giving her options, right? And and so, because I thought maybe I'll give her the option and she'll choose the other one. And she said, no, I want to do it on a wall. I said, oh, great. Why? She goes, I don't really know. I just feel like I want to do something bad like that. So like clearly somehow she never got the idea bad from at home. So clearly she's got the idea bad. And although at the same time, you know, like I've always kind of been into, you know, bucking the system and all that kind of stuff anyways. We were always looking at systems, but she wanted to do this graffiti. So I said, cool. Do you want some help? Can we do it together? And she said, I would love that. So we started to look, this is before the internet, right? So we found that there was it before the internet? She would have been 10. So it would have been like 2007. Maybe we had access to like Alta Vista or something like that back in the day, or text-based. But anyways, we found that there was this graffiti store in Kensington Market, and they sold like graffiti-specific spray paint and the nozzles, and so we went to the store together, and there's this like father and his 10-year-old asking, how do you not get caught? And what are the best spray paints to use? And what do we do? And what are the best areas to go? And he's kind of shaking his head, but like, this is what he does. He was giving us all the information. And then we came home, and the whole time that we're doing this, we're talking about it, and we're exploring it. And we're like, okay, we're going to go here, and we're going to dress in black. And then we would talk about, well, what happens if we get caught? And what happens if the owner comes out? And we would talk about those things. But the thing is, again, my goal was I want her to examine her value around this. I don't want her to adopt my value or to react out of fear, imposed fear. Fear that comes from our own exploration is different. And so I never said to her, what do you think the storekeeper would feel if they came out and saw that, and then they'd have to clean it, and it's expense, and it's so hard for them? I didn't do that, but I did say, what happens if what is the impact that it would have on the different people, and is it worth it to us, and is that okay? And because like sometimes people are inconvenienced by our choices. If we're always making our choices to never inconvenience anybody in any situation, that's going to be really challenging. So again, discernment comes into it. How can we use our discernment here? And how is our discernment aligning with our values? And what are your values? And you can't do that kind of deep exploration from the outside. One of my sayings is there's no way in from the outside. And so then the two of us are dressed in black, and it's 2 a.m, and we're walking out the door. And just as we were putting on our shoes, she goes, Dad, maybe I will just do it on the canvas after all. And we never went out. Would I have gone out? Yes, but we never did go out. And we bought the canvas, and she did it. And it was just like this wonderful experience. So for me, like, again, the point of this is that it's a long-term exploration of discovery, co-discovery. And I will not damage my opportunity, the role to do that. So it's not stepping back and letting them do whatever they want, as they say, letting them do whatever they want. It's not that, because the let isn't part of my interaction, but it's also not telling them what to do and stopping them from doing it. It's this other thing. There's those 4 parenting commonly, I don't know why people think they're the only ones, but there's 4 common parenting strategies where they say it's authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and then there's like some other one. But all of those, or maybe it's just the 3, but all of those come from an authority-based relationship and aren't really this horizontal power sharing, co-learning, refusing to hold power over the other person, but engaged in a deep exploration of life relationship. And so for me, that's the way to help our kids with their values, to help them evaluate these kind of things and make the choices that make the most sense to them.
So it's part of the argument that if you want to impose values, you will fail at doing so.
If you want to impose values, you will fail at doing so. It's very likely you will fail at doing so. I mean, some might get in because they might align. Or some might, I guess it depends on how we think of values too. Like our values, because like I had this friend who said, well, one day my dad yelled at me for stealing a grape in the store, and I never did it again. But I don't know if this person actually took it on as a value, or they created a fear response in their consciousness, and it's behaviorism. Like that's a behaviorism moment, right? And now they have this fear response or this behavior response, and then that's what they're doing. But is that a value? Is that did they have a chance to really think about life? So and I guess for me, the imposing implies pain and pleasure, and forcing the issue in some way, and creating that kind of automatic response, as opposed to a value, which is a human learning to know themselves and be aware of themselves and their impact, and feeling into what is that value for them. So
nice.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And then another question occurred, which is what if you yourself feel uncomfortable with helping your daughter with spray painting a wall?
Right. Yes. There's a couple of different aspects to that. One is we don't always have to actually do the thing to stay connected to and a safe space for the person. We can still talk about it without the wrongness. I could have said, "Hey, kiddo, it's really interesting. Let's figure out what the safest way to do it is so that you don't get caught, and let's talk about what the impact of it is. And we can talk about it and explore. I don't necessarily have to go and do it, and certainly I haven't done everything that she's wanted to do. There's a certain amount of honoring ourselves that makes a lot of sense. And there's also a certain amount, I think it makes sense for us to push ourselves out of our comfort for the sake of the long-term guide relationship and understanding how it's affected by that. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think there's some stretching that we can always do, and I'm always stretching. I'm always trying to stretch myself. I'm always trying to stretch myself out of the wrongness and into the deep acceptance and into the collaboration and into the co-thinking and the co-exploring. So I think on the one hand, we can find different ways. And then on the other hand, we can stretch ourselves.
And I think this example is about something kind of maybe illegal, possibly violent. There's also situations in which children want to do things which, although they're not illegal, they're kind of frowned upon. Like sometimes people want to spend the weekend watching TV and eating ice cream, and this is seen as something bad. I guess now that I'm saying this, I'm realizing it might be exactly the same situation, but do you think about that any differently then? So some parents would say, my child will not watch TV and eat ice cream because that is instilling in them the idea that they don't need to be healthy people. They will learn that they can kind of slack off. They won't have standards for themselves. And without a parental figure kind of pushing the child into having certain standards, the child won't develop that him or herself. Which, yeah, so I think that's roughly the same situation. But do you think it's different, or?
Yeah, I think depending on how far down the iceberg we go, it becomes very similar. But also it is different in practical application. It feels different. It's more common. It's a daily kind of thing. And certainly screens and food and sleep and hygiene and homework and respect and all those things are toothbrushing. These things are all like daily struggles for a lot of parents. And I work with parents on a weekly, often daily basis. And we are exploring these concepts and how to work with them in the minutiae of daily life. So I'm not only talking about it from a distant philosophical perspective, but I'm like, especially the last couple of years since Sujai and I started our coaching group, we are like daily with the parents navigating these things. And so and you kind of answered it in the way you asked the question, because you said they're seen as bad things, right? And I think this is a big part of it. So there's a couple of things. One is that it's important for us to examine our own values around it and why we have those values. It seems really obvious to people that you need to work and get a job, but there's so much more to life than working and getting a job. And if our parenting is all focused on working and getting a job and doing well in school, we're missing a whole lot of. That's why I say it's a whole being co-learning relationship, right? We're missing a whole lot. So one thing is to really examine our own priorities around that. And then let's say, okay, I do want to instill into my kid a certain standard. This is again if I'm working on the behavior, if I'm modifying the behavior through coercion, through my power, then their experience is not that they've found a standard for themselves. Certainly not. What they're doing is being forced into uh, being forced into what's the word, conforming to the standard from the external authority that isn't safe and isn't trusted. So specifically, the standard that we're trying to get them to do, we're actually pushing them away from, because we're making them engage with it in a way that doesn't feel good to their system, that isn't actually teaching them that the reason for doing the thing is self-love. The reason for doing this thing is we care about ourselves and our quality of life, you know. And sometimes watching TV all day and eating ice cream all day is the best thing for our lives, you know. It isn't true that it's always bad. Is it, if the rest of our lives that's all we ever do, that could be problematic. But then how do we help kids learn that to want to do these other things? Like one of my one-liners is, and this is about toothbrushing, one of my one-liners is, I didn't want to teach, I didn't, how's it go? Oh, the question isn't how do I get my kid to love their teeth? The question, I gave away the punchline. The question isn't how do I get my kid to brush their teeth? The question is how do I get my kid to love their teeth? And it's not, I use the word get just because it sounds good, but obviously I'm not trying to get them, because I said there's no get. There's no let and no get. I always say there's no let and no get in my relationship. But still, and one-liners have some poetic license. And so this is the thing, right? If I want them to shift their relationship to screens and food, then I have to understand why. What's the purpose behind it? What's the feeling that I want them to have? Well, there's something I call the teaching values non-coercively flowchart. And so what I do, and it's a flowchart. So what I do is I put the value that I want to impart or nourish or explain or explore, depending on how you think of it. And I don't have a problem with the word teach in the sense that I talked about earlier, of having this like deep, safe, connected teaching relationship, especially if it's mutual. There can be an ecstatic experience in having that kind of relationship. But still, I call the teaching values non-coercively flowchart. So first, I think like if we take brushing teeth, and then underneath it, I think, well, what are all the things that would contribute to someone brushing their teeth? So number one, recognizing the value of teeth. Another one, caring about myself and my body. Another one, managing sensory issues that I might have around it. Another one, not having extra layers of coercion and power that I'm rebelling against in the toothbrushing. So I have all these things. Then I take each of those and I think, okay, well, what would make somebody, what are the like values and the perspectives and the experiences that would help somebody really care for their body? How can I share the idea of the value of teeth without them thinking that it's me trying to manipulate them? It's like, how can I share the values of brushing teeth in a way that it actually goes in, like talking to the kid about stealing first and then helping them see themselves after that. And so I go through each of those layers and I think about how can I teach the value that teaches the value that teaches the value. And then I think about, and then I put my attention down here. And so for me, the work is almost always down here. When I there was this one parent who was like, their kid would not brush their teeth. And the dentist put the fear of whatever into them. They were jabbing the toothbrush into their mouth, and the kid is screaming, and it was this horrible traumatic thing, and they were losing connection with their kid and trust. And so I said, listen, just forget about brushing the teeth for now. I know they've got cavities, and I know you're worried, but you're not making things better right now, and you know it. They're going to hate brushing their teeth, and the moment that they can learn that they can close their mouth and won't let you open it, what are you going to do? Use a vice grip? What are you going to do? And so just forget about it. But invite them in to sit with you when you're brushing your teeth and make it a fun connecting time. Let them play with the toothpaste and do finger painting on the mirror. Yes, you'll have to clean it up after, but finger paint on the mirror. And buy a bunch of toothbrushes from the dollar store and kind of have them around the house, and then talk non-manipulatively about teeth, and just make the whole experience around it, shift the whole experience, make it relational, make it fun, make it joyous, and just trust them, trust the path. So her kid was like 2 or 3 years old. The first time she went to her kid and said, listen, kiddo, from now on, I call all kids kiddo. So I just use that. I don't know if she actually said that. I said, listen, kiddo, I realize that I've been pushing you to brush your teeth and I'm not going to do it anymore. From now on, if you don't want to brush your teeth, you don't have to. I'm not going to force you. And this kid, hi, Katie, I'm so happy to see you. And this kid immediately started to cry. She goes, no, it can't be. No. And she was crying because this sudden experience of respect and freedom was like overwhelming for her. It was so out of her experience from having just had the toothbrush jammed in her mouth. 2 or 3 days, she cried every single toothbrushing time, but then she stopped crying and would just hang out quietly in the bathroom, sitting on the counter. Then she did start to play, and they started to do finger painting on the mirror. And just recently, this is like 5-6 years ago, but just recently, another parent sent me a finger painting picture on the mirror. Look, Vivek, look at the finger painting. And then after 2 weeks of this, the kid just one day went, Mommy, could you brush my teeth for me? And I said, even then, just go slow. Just do one tooth, one stroke. Let's just start there. We don't have to jab the toothbrush in right away. And then talk about it. How was that? How was that for you? And explore it. And slowly, they built up this completely new pattern, completely new relationship to each other, to themselves, and to the activity. And it became a self-sustaining habit after that. And it made sense to the kid after that. And it didn't have all the layers after that, And it's such a different way of looking at it, because we have to step so far back from the control behavioristic paradigm to be able to work this way. This is why this whole methodology is so for me, it's like radical. It's still radical. It was radical 25 years ago, and to me, it's still radical because it's not coercing, but it's also not stepping back. It's this deep relationship that we form together and we work on together.
It also reminds me of something that David Friedman pointed out when he gave a talk at the Society last year, which is that when parents punish children, it's very often superfluous. Like the punishment for, say, not brushing your teeth is that you get cavities, and the punishment for not eating food is that you're hungry. So adding that extra punishment on there kind of makes no sense. There is already a kind of built-in logic to the whole situation. And in fact, you're both on the same side of that problem.
Absolutely.
That's just something I remembered having learned from Friedman.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. And sometimes it's worth it to go hungry because you're enjoying something so much and you just don't want to eat. And even it's sometimes worth that discomfort. That's where the discernment comes in.
Yeah, I like that aspect of it too, of your philosophy, that you're kind of encouraging people to think about things more deeply than they would otherwise do. Like people actually have ideas, children have ideas about what they want to do and why. And as you said earlier, if a child doesn't steal something because it's just kind of a fear reaction, then that's not really having a value. Then I like that point. I see that some people have raised their hands, and I have some more questions, but I'm also very curious what other people have to say. So Luli, go ahead.
Hey, first of all, amazing talk. That was so great. My question is, so you indicated that having a relationship, like a good relationship with yourself, is quite important, and like you're constantly thinking about like, how do I do this better and everything. My question is, do you think that having a good relationship with your parents is also like a part of this? Because like there's this kind of whole thing where you were brought up under like certain type of parenting, and that like affects you in quite a deep way, and it like affects all of your life. And so like what do you think of that? Is that kind of a key thing, or can you sort of learn to parent well even without that?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Thank you. And it's really both. I think that all of us come to this moment with whatever has happened before. And we can choose in this moment to take whatever we've had before and work with it to align ourselves with the principles, right? Would it have helped if I had never been punished? Yes, it would have made a big difference to my efficacy, to my understanding. I would have screamed at my kid a lot less in those first few years as I was figuring out what happened. I would have been more aware of the different things. I would have had much more capacity. But I was where I was when I was at that time, and that's what I had, right? I also had a mother who was pretty radical herself. She had, both her parents and my dad's parents were very controlling. My dad was quite controlling, and yet something in her knew she wanted to do something different. And so she would do things a little bit different, like she tells this story of one time I spilled milk on the floor and I got afraid, and she said, "Oh, come, let's play in it before we clean it up." And we played in it. And, like I'm 52, so that would have been 50 years ago. This is a pretty radical thing for 50 years ago. And my sister once drew with crayons on our nice couch in the living room. We had the couch. We had the couch in the family room. That was a little more casual. The couch in the basement that was fully play. But then we had the nice couch in the living room. Of course, the kids weren't supposed to mess that couch. And my sister had drawn with crayons, and my dad got upset with her. And my mom pulled the couch away from the wall, and they created their own little space on the couch where they could draw on crayons together. And she said, it's really not bad to do it. Let's just do it in a way that nobody sees. And so she was doing these kind of little things amidst the coercion and force that she was experiencing, so that it informed me in a way that I wouldn't have had that. I always tell her she planted the seed that I that like had its blossom in me, and my kid is going to have a completely different experience that way too, because I was still like so stuck in my tangled mass of wrongness and trauma when I first became a parent, and my kid just doesn't have that wrongness in her system. She just doesn't. It's amazing to witness her. People who get to know her, they're a little bit. It's a little bit disconcerting, the lack of this wrongness, and it feeds them too. They feel it too. Even in the workplace, she like automatically becomes the favorite employee wherever she works, because she has this sense of empathy and connection and understanding of the human condition, and this no wrongness, where she's able to take things in and work with them and swirl them with the no wrongness and come and output them in a different way. And it's like this incredible thing. I don't have that. I have to fight for every little bit of no wrongness. And so, yeah, I think that the impact of our parents is profound, and wherever we are at this moment, we can take a step towards the non-coercive collaborative mindset, and that's why I call it the daily grind. It's up on my chart over there. I call it the daily grind. Every day I wake up and I say, this is what I'm going to work on. And then I go to bed at night and I evaluate how I did and what I did that was more in alignment, and what I could do more of, and what I did less in alignment. I try not to say right and wrong, and what I did less in alignment, and how I can work on that the next day. And I just keep going. And so I think of that as a parent, like, how am I impacting my kid? And I also think of my own past. And that's why I also held little Vivek all the time, and I talk to little Vivek all the time, because he's still longing for that safe adult to really see him. And I'm that safe adult now. I can be that safe adult, and I want him to feel that, so that there's more of a relaxation in my own system. Do you think that addressed what you were asking?
Yeah, and well, partly the one aspect that I'm curious about is sort of like, so there's the reparenting yourself, and then but something like, is it either necessary or like worthwhile to repair like relationships with actual parents, just because like you can be so influenced, and like family life and that kind of thing, like that seems like a more complicated
All right, thank you. I don't think it's necessary. I think it could be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary, especially since, and again, this is coming from working very closely with a lot of parents. There are some people's parents who just are so far away from the mindset, and so painful, and so manipulating, and so coercive, and so critical, that every time the kid engages with them, I even said kid, every time the parent engages with them, they go to their hurt child, and it's like constantly going back to like, I don't want to say levels, but like sliding backwards and having to claw your way forwards. And so for some people, setting a boundary with their parents and distancing themselves from it internally and or externally, can be the most important thing. For some people, it really is important for them to do this work and to go back and to repair and forgive. And I think a lot of it is about our own journey, where we are, what we can manage, what there is with our parents, what the situation is with them in their lives and their own journey. I think this is one of those discernment things that has a lot of different aspects to it. I myself, with my dad, I always had people telling me, you really should forgive your dad. You really should forgive your dad. And I just like, no way, And in the early days, I told my dad about how I wanted to parent and the kind of things I didn't want my kid exposed to, and he refused to accept it. And so we just pulled away. We saw him on, his birthday and Christmas, and then he would drop by to him and my stepmom would drop. My parents had been like divorced when I was in high school, so him and my stepmom would come by with a card on her birthday, and that was it for years and years and years. And only my dad passed away about a year and a half ago. And only in the last 2, maybe 3 years before that did my heart start to soften. And I kind of felt he was like, he was blind and he couldn't walk very much, and like he was like declining physically. And I thought, and something in me was like, I want him to feel that I love him and forgive him before he goes. I just had that come to me, that feeling come to me. It was intuition. It wasn't like some kind of imposed idea that I had to do it. And so I started going over there more, and I started calling him 2 or 3 times a week, and he started opening up to me about his past and sharing stuff, and telling me he loved my articles and everything. And I remember one time, like just a few months before he left, I said to him, yeah, Dad, I share all the time in my workshops and stuff about how you used to punish me and hit me all the time. And I was going to say, I hope it doesn't upset you or whatever. And he goes, yeah, well, you deserved it. And this is when I was in the middle of my forgiveness process. But because I had already got to the point where I was, oh my gosh, little baby, I see a little baby on the screen. I love you, little baby. You are power and beauty and wisdom. And I see the power of the universe in you, little one. You have, this was a hard world, but you have everything that you need to navigate this world. And I believe in you, sweetheart. I believe in you.
Thank you.
Yes, I always love to speak power into little ones. Oh, and please teach me what you know. Please teach me what it was like where you came from. You remember it so much more than I do. And I would really love to remember that. What's it like to not have all the labels and all the judgments, kiddo? I believe in you. Thank you. All right. So because I was already kind of in that headspace, I was able to take that in and see him and see where he was and just laugh and love him for it, right? But it was like decades of refusing to do that before I was there. And so I don't think I would never want to impose that on someone. And I think it can be really helpful. And it certainly has made my inner life much more settled and peaceful since I engaged on that process. So I would say, yeah, it can be a helpful thing to do. I would never put a should on it. I think it's part of our growth and evolution, and each person kind of has to feel into themselves where they're at with that.
Thanks for the answer. I hope that settles it fully. Great. Then there's a question in the chat which reads, Vivek, thank you for your time. Do you have suggestions for how to discuss this mindset approach with one's partner, especially if they have an extensive trauma history from their own parents?
Right, and I'm guessing are resisting the idea, and partially because of that. Yes, there's a couple of things that we can do. So one is to recognize that to see their iceberg as you're interacting with them, to see that the reason that they're responding the way they do, thinking the way they do, is from their own iceberg. This to really embrace non-coercive, collaborative relating to someone, to really embrace not using force and power. it's hard. It's hard because we have all of that in our own past, and we have all of that in almost every system and structure of society reflects that. I mean, there are some conscious communities that are working to change that. Like that's where Luli and I originally met. We were at a like a discussion group back in 2018 that was hosted by my friend Tanya Williams in Kitchener, who is part of an intentional learning community that's like decades old, with this brilliant woman, Jean Robertson, at the head, and they call themselves the collaboratory and the what is it, the liminal space agency. they love really creative names, and so like there are communities that are around that are working on it, but really like how are most people gonna ever interact with that kind of stuff, right? So like it's really hard to step out of that. So one of the things that I do before I engage with someone is I really get clear on seeing their iceberg and seeing the huge massive stuff that is contributing to the way that they're thinking, because that's only like up here and all that other stuff is down here. Second, I want to feel my iceberg and really see it. What are my responses to this? How am I reacting to it? What is like being activated in me? How am I judging this person? Judging is different than evaluating, right? Evaluating is like looking at the situation as it is and taking in all the information, and judging is the wrongness and the shame and the blame. And then I want to also validate the other person's positive, loving intentions, because I know that even a parent who says, if you don't go to bed in 5 minutes, you're going to lose your iPad. As if that's going to help. But anyways, I'm not going to talk about that. But if a parent who says that, some part of them is still thinking that's the best thing for their child. They need sleep. It's better for their body. They're going to be grumpy the next day. And they're not going to get sleep. And they're probably thinking, I need some time to myself, and I want some time to my partner, and I'm not going to get that if the kid is up all night. So like there are these need meeting strategies, and Marshall Rosenberg talks about that. There are need meeting strategies at play here. They're not effective ways to meet those needs. They're not, elegant ways to meet those needs. And they're very disconnecting, and they often give us the opposite of what we really want. But that's what's happening. And so when I can see and validate those needs, then the person who I'm talking to doesn't feel like I'm telling them they're wrong. Because then adding one more, like you were saying about adding punishment to the already natural punishment, if I add wrongness to the iceberg of wrongness that they're already carrying around, I'm not going to get anywhere. So I want to first say, hey, I really get that you're doing this because of this, this, and this, and I also share the desire for my kid to have a healthy relationship with sleep. I also care for my kid to want to be able to get a job and sustain themselves, even if it's not 100% true. Sometimes, because like I said, there's a certain kind of working with the truth that makes sense in different circumstances. But it's kind of also true. I do want my kid to be able to engage in the world in a way that will sustain themselves. Doesn't mean I necessarily want them to get a job in a corporation, but I do want them to have some sense of that, and I want to help guide them through that and think about it. And so like I want to find what's common that we have, what's connecting that we have, what are the problems that we see in common, and then from there we can talk about the strategies to first of all, the strategies to meet the needs of the parents, and then to work through the problems that we see, because we definitely see the problems in different ways and we see the strategies in different ways. But if we start from where it's different, if we start from where we're disconnected, it's going to be really hard for us to get to the part of where we are connected. And just like with kids, this can be a longer term process because there's a lot of stuff to dig through, and we have to have a lot of patience, I also, because the question specifically was, how do I talk to my partner who is like this, or my co-parent who is like this? A lot of the times, parents that I work with, whether they're still with their partners or they're having to co-parent at a distance because they're separated or divorced, will like write these emails to the other parent and then send them to me and say, hey, can you help me take the wrongness out of this and make more connecting to the needs and the feelings? And then we'll like edit it together, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't even think that was wrongness. And I said, yeah, but they're gonna feel like they're being told off as a 4-year-old in this moment, and they're totally gonna close up. And so yeah, so I think that really helps. The iceberg, the wrongness, the needs, focusing on the connection, and then working through looking at the strategies, and having that empathy and for their experience and for us too. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. Then I see that Charles has a question. He has his hand raised, and I would also, because of the time, like to suggest that maybe this we make this the final question, unless there's other people who have something very pressing to say. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. But yes, Charles, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Vivek, for your talk. Really appreciate it. I
Thank
was
you.
curious. You mentioned your daughter had a door open to be homeschooled, and she elected to go to the public school system. I was wondering. I was curious to know her motivations, her reasons, if you care to share them.
I don't have a clear answer to that, to be honest. I'm not sure she has a clear answer to that, to be honest. Because you know, this was something that she has had a pretty clear idea of from kindergarten. I really don't know. I don't know why in kindergarten she wanted to. I really don't know that. I think as she was growing through the system, she became attached to her friends and didn't really want to leave that. I think a part of it was she liked having her own space away from family. She had a lot of challenging teachers, which caused her a lot of stress. Schoolwork all the way through middle school was not a big issue for her, but once she hit high school, and especially second, third, fourth year, was really hard for her. But I don't really know. To be honest, I don't really know. I think a lot of it was social. But I honestly think that this is one of those things, you know, where I really encouraged her. It's a good question, because it's one of those things where we never got a clear answer about the why, but her knowing was so clear. And I wanted her to know that even if she didn't know exactly why, if she felt clarity, it made sense for her to follow it, and that we would always support it. And she didn't have to necessarily say why, you know, because we basically unschooled public school, because, you know, she never had to go if she didn't want to. She never had to give a reason. She never had to even tell me she wasn't going. She never had to do any work she didn't want to do. She never had to complete any assignment. She never had to get any grade on a test. She never had to pass anything. If she wanted, and like I mentioned before, if she didn't want to do homework, but she didn't want to not do the homework, she would ask me to do it for her. Or sometimes we would do it together, where she would come up with the ideas and I would type it in, and then she would make sentences and then I would edit it. And our handwriting is similar, so if it was a handwritten thing, sometimes I would just write the whole thing for her. You know, like we did, we always collaborated on it, and she felt like tremendously supported. And just the other day, she was saying, you know, Dad, the other day she's in her first long-term relationship, and they're going to be moving in together soon, and life is moving to a new phase. But she was saying, you know, Dad, the other day I was helping Han with something that she was working on, and I used the same strategy you used to use with me with the essays, where you would ask for my ideas and then you would write them down, so I didn't have to, because I didn't like doing that part, but I liked the ideas, and then I helped her form it into sentences, and we made a whole thing with it. It felt so good. I was like, wow, she wasn't only doing the thing, but she was watching and learning about the strategy at the same time, and it made it her own and found it her own way. So, you know, I mean, I kind of veered away from your question because I don't actually know, but you know, every year and all throughout the year, she had the option. One year, I was a stay-at-home dad, and worked, whatever work I did, worked from home. And so one year, I think it was grade 7 or something, she really couldn't stand her geography teacher and her French teacher. And so I found out that there was a partial homeschooling option in the Toronto public school system. And so I opted her out of those 2 classes. And fortunately, they were back to back. And every single day I would go, not everybody can do this, I know, but every single day I would go to school and I would pick her up. And we would spend geography and French together, and then I would drop her back, and she would finish the day off. And we did this for the entire school year, or half the school year, because it was semestered. And I would, it was technically homeschooling. And I would say, and I would go, that's a building and that's a road. There's your geography lesson. Let's go hang out. And we would just hang out, and we would explore life, and we would play, and we would enjoy each other, and we would bond. And then I would drop her back at school, and she, and you know, like things like that were so profound to her in her experience of school. But still, every year and all the time, she wanted to go. And it was very, very clear to her. And even now, she holds the trauma of it, and she knows about the trauma, and she's aware of it, and she still feels confident that her decision was the right one. It's interesting to me. I don't 100% know how that happens.
Thank you, and thanks again for the nice chat.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this might be a good point to stop the event.
Before you do,
yes,
before you do, someone else has said there's an addiction question that I didn't see, and I actually would like to know what that is, because that's a
okay,
that's
Olga,
a pretty good thing, a good topic.
Could you talk about? So I think this is the question Lily's referring to. Could you talk about addiction? Is this method of exploring life with a child and being on the side? Sorry, and being on the side going to help with that? On the inside, sorry. Kept rereading. Yeah, should I read it again? I kind of messed up the...
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so could you talk about addiction? Is this method of exploring life as a child and being on the inside going to help with that?
Right. Method of exploring life with a child and being on the inside going to help with that. So are we talking about like the appearance of a child being addicted to screens? Or are we talking about addiction later on and appearing later on in life? The answer is yes to both, but they are different, slightly different. A lot of the time, first of all, I'll say a lot of the time we call things addiction that aren't necessarily addiction. You know, like a kid really enjoying watching YouTube and watches a lot of YouTube isn't necessarily addicted to YouTube. And when kids do things way more than we think that they should be doing it, we often call it addiction. And then there's the idea that, and I think that, you know, there's more and more understanding of addiction as we study brain science and psychology as time goes on. I understand that it's more than just a behavior pattern you can't give up, that it comes from trauma and it comes from attachment things, and it comes from you know, things inside that we're seeking to work with, and then it becomes patterns that are entrenched in our systems, and so it's kind of a combination of those things. But it's a similar kind of situation where if I want to help a kid see those patterns and help them see the impact on their lives of those patterns, and I'm doing it from a place of telling them that the impact that they are making bad choices and they're damaging themselves and there's wrongness in it, it's going to be very hard for that person to take in what I'm saying. They're not going to want me to. They're not going to want to hear my guidance or my, me wanting to help them with it. And you know, for me, like the sense of the self-awareness and self-relationship that's formed where I want to make decisions that benefit me. This is not something people necessarily really think about, that I really want to make decisions that benefit me. And I know that I make decisions that don't benefit me all the time from my compulsions and from trying to fill holes, HOLE holes inside of myself, lacks, things that I'm, areas that I don't feel acceptable. I have trouble saying no to things. And I make all sorts of decisions around things that aren't really in my best interest, And I think I want the thing, but I really don't want the thing. And when I self-reflect and I realize I don't want it, but I still go back to it, and I have this push and pull, to be able to help someone have the mindset that they really caring that their decisions impact them in a positive way, in a way that brings them more of what they really want, and to be able to discover what they really want for themselves. 100%, this is something that that can't happen from the outside. And a lot of the time, the stuff that we want to change patterns and to build new patterns, it's painful and it's difficult and it's challenging and it requires work and it requires some sacrifice, because letting go of the old patterns is hard and shifting into new patterns is hard. Sometimes it's not hard. Sometimes we have epiphanies and we're like, and things go, but I don't discount epiphanies. I love epiphanies, and we can certainly till the soil to create the ground so epiphanies are easier to come to us. But a lot of the work is the daily grind that I talk about. And I remember one time not too long ago, my kid, I was telling my kid, oh, I don't know what to eat right now. I know this isn't directly addiction, but it's kind of like the mindset that helps work with the addiction, right? Which again is the iceberg. What I'm going to what's underneath the behavior. And so my kid, I was standing in the kitchen. I said, I don't know what I want to eat right now. And she said to me, you need to listen to your body, Dad. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And she said, yeah, what you need to do is ask your body and then listen to what it's telling you. Because sometimes the thing you want to eat, your body will say, yes, you should eat that. But sometimes the thing you want to eat, your body will say, no, don't eat that. And sometimes it even tell you to eat something you don't really like because it needs it. And if you listen to it and you learn to tune into it, then it'll guide you, and you have to trust it and do what it tells you. I said, thank you, kiddo. And then the co-guiding relationship, right? I didn't want her to just do it. I wanted to feel it. So I closed my eyes and she watched me. I did a micro meditation and I actually asked my body. I mean, I was kind of doing it anyways, but with her pointing at it, I actually asked my body and I listened for that message. And then the answer came and I was like, I got the answer. Thank you. And then like a few days later, I thanked her again. And a few days later, I thanked again. And I bring it up in workshops so that she has that reinforced, that she helped me learn this thing, you know. But of course, that's what I told her for years and years and years and years as we were going through that. When she would talk about food, my question was, what is your body telling you right now? And what is that? And what does that mean? And what do you want? And and even if we do want to help our kids shift patterns, let's say they are watching screens more than we think is healthy, as long as we are imposing on them and using coercion, they are not learning these lessons about how to make choices that are best for them according to them. What they are doing is conforming to the expectations of the power structure. And I can't tell you how many parents I talk to where the kids are hiding candy in the bedroom or in the toilet. I had one family who their kid was hiding. This is a family who's like really trying to be non-coercive. They were just putting limits on sugar, and the kid was hiding sugar in the toilet tank in a baggie. And they discovered it in there, and they called me. They're like, Vivek, I don't know what to do. I've been trying everything you say, but then the one thing I was still holding on to, and I found this they're hiding. You know, like a year later, I asked her about it, and she was like, my God, my kid would never hide something like that from me now, just after a year of shifting patterns, right? It was hard to even imagine her kid hiding that kind of thing from her. And then they go to their friends' houses and use their devices or use their devices at school. And then you have the kids that dress how the parent wants them to dress until they're out of sight, and they take all the clothes off, and then they dress how they want to dress to go to school. Like time after time, kids will find ways to get that autonomy, or they capitulate inside and out, and they lose that sense of themselves. That's not any better. I say there's three main reactions to coercion: resistance, compliance, and distance. And none of the three of those are genuine human relationship, either with the self or with the other. And all of them seem like a great loss to me. And so for me, if I want to be that guide, especially if my kid's suffering with something, especially if they're struggling with something, I have to nurture that guide relationship in a way that's going to make it stable and resilient and sustainable.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, because it's an interesting question. I often have the feeling that people who have this idea about addiction kind of have an unimaginative view of the situation, where the idea is that you, for example, a child is on the internet, and if they weren't on the internet, then they would be doing homework, which just isn't the case. Like very often, the thing that people use to kind of relax or to they have a reason for using whatever it is that they're using, not just kids, adults too. Like if an adult is drinking too much, then there's probably a reason for that. And if they suddenly didn't have any access to alcohol, then that doesn't necessarily mean that their inner problem, their inner struggle would be resolved. They might just use something else. It might just be that the alcohol is the best available solution to them, and they will now resort to using something that is actually even worse than alcohol. And the same is true of children. And also, of course, if you have a child and they're playing too many video games or something, and they think that they have a problem with this, but they know that if they go to you to say, I think I'm playing too many video games because I'm actually playing like 8 hours more than you think I am because I never sleep, then they know your first reaction will be, okay, well then, we take away the computer,
right?
Which is not a solution to them. Because then that again forces them to resort to something that might be even worse. Or right. I mean, I think video games are great, so I wouldn't say they're bad. But,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, just to add on top of that a bit.
So true.
Great. Then, yeah, I really enjoyed the talk. I thought it was excellent. I feel like I share your idea about the possibility that there's always an opportunity to cooperate with your children and with each other. And yeah, I thought it was just fantastic. So thanks so much. And Thank you. I will again show my appreciation with a virtual applause.
Thank you.
Great.
And I really like to invite everybody to follow me on social media.
Yes.
I do most of my writing on Facebook at Meaningful Ideas, and also on YouTube, Meaningful Ideas. Twitter, I've just started tweeting on a regular basis after like 6 years I haven't tweeted, and I'm all of a sudden tweeting again. And on Instagram, I'm also Meaningful Ideas everywhere. And my one celebrity share on Instagram is Alanis Morissette. Alanis Morissette shared one of my parenting sayings last year, which I was very excited about because Jagged Little Pill was like the only album I listened to for like 2 years. And meaningfulideas.com is my blog, which is really just a broken website with like 500 articles on it. But I wrote, this is back in 2015, I wrote every day for a year. And so all those articles are at meaningfulideas.com. And my awareness has changed and grown a bit since then, but there's still a lot of gold in there. And my membership group, if you want to work with me personally, you can come to gentleparentsunite.com. And I do weekly calls. I do a weekly live like this. I talk for an hour or 2 hours on a specific subject. And I'm usually making like really detailed notes and parsing everything into a lot of detail. And I also do a meditation every week, and I also do a live group coaching call where everybody gets 15 or 20 minutes to ask a question, and we look at the non-coercive collaborative way to work with it. And it's really it's affordable, and there's a sliding scale, and it's really lovely to be part of a community of people that are really dedicated to living this principle in themselves and in their families. And that's it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all. This is kind of, for me, this is kind of like a loop that's come full circle after meeting Luli all those years ago, and hearing about taking children seriously, and hearing about you, David, and Sarah, and my mind going, wow, there's people out there thinking like this, wow. And then, 4 years later, here we are. I just really feel a sense of joy around that. And so I want to express great appreciation to all of you.
Yeah. Again, thanks so much for coming. And we'll make sure to link each of those websites, social media accounts in the description of the video. And I think if people have further questions, then they can contact you through Twitter and other social media.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. And maybe there's some brief housekeeping for next week, which is we have 2 talks planned. One by Joseph Agassi, who will talk about the hazard of education. Or rather, I think we're going to discuss an essay of his called Overcoming the Hazard, called Education. And we'll have a talk by Alison Gopnik on Monday, not next week, the week after. So that being said, thanks everyone for coming. I hope to see you during those other talks, and bye for now.